Regulations don't pause for emergencies.
Neither does a life at risk.
Flip that switch again. She's crowning. The room was bathed in emergency red as the lights cut out, machines silenced, and my wife's voice broke into a terrified scream. For 1 second, I thought the breaker tripped. Then I saw the HOA tag zip-tied to the line outside my window. Unauthorized power accessory. Violation 14B. The officer of rules had done it. She'd actually shut us down mid-labor. I tore across the hall, rain hammering against the glass. The hum of our backup generator, the same unit that kept Hannah's monitors alive, was dead silent. Out in the driveway stood Margaret Corbin, arms folded, crimson blazer bright even under the lightning. "You can't do this," I shouted through the storm. She smiled. "Your generator violates visual uniformity. You were warned, Dr. Pierce." And right there, between thunder and her smirk, I realized she didn't see a family fighting for life. She saw a man breaking symmetry. If you've ever watched someone abuse power while a life hung in the balance, hit subscribe right now. I said quietly to whoever might one day hear this story. Stay with me. What happens next isn't vengeance, it's accountability. The clipboard queen turned, sheltering beneath her HOA umbrella like she was royalty under siege. "You think rules don't apply to you because you've got degrees on the wall?" "I designed this grid," I snapped. "Every inch of wiring under this neighborhood, mine. I wrote the firmware that keeps your streetlights from frying in the rain." That stopped her for a heartbeat, but pride always outruns reason. "Then you should have known better than to break protocol." I stepped closer until the wind carried our breath in the same rhythm. "Protocol doesn't cover childbirth." Her gaze flicked toward Hannah's shadowed window. "That's unfortunate." That word, unfortunate, lodged in my chest like shrapnel. Years ago, we'd lost our first child because of a blackout in Houston. Since then, I'd built systems, redundant power, fail-safes, everything to make sure no one's life depended on bureaucracy again. And tonight, in the most controlled neighborhood in Texas, an HOA tyrant had done the very thing I'd sworn to prevent. I sprinted back inside. My wife's pulse monitor blinked faintly on its dying battery. She reached for me, fingers trembling. "Sam, it's happening." I gripped her hand. "I know. Hold on." Then the doorbell chimed. 3 times, precise, deliberate. Margaret Corbin didn't just want compliance, she wanted surrender. I opened the door to find her standing there, dry under her umbrella, while the storm drenched me. "We've contacted emergency services," she said sweetly, "but they can't enter until your structure passes inspection. Liability, you understand." My laugh came out hollow. "You just turned a delivery room into a crime scene." Her eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, doctor. The board documents everything." Behind me, Hannah cried out again. Something inside me clicked. The calm, procedural kind of rage engineers get when logic meets evil. If you document everything, you might want to start recording the part where you obstruct emergency care. She tilted her head, unfazed. "Careful. Threats against an HOA official can result in termination of residency." That was the moment the power surged back, not from her mercy, but from my override. The generator I'd hidden underground kicked to life, disguised beneath irrigation control housing. The house hummed, lights flared, and her umbrella snapped backward in the wind. Her expression cracked. You bypassed the main relay." "I built the main relay," I said. The enforcer in crimson glared, soaked now, her illusion bleeding into the night. "You'll regret this, Dr. Pierce." "Not half as much as you will." She stepped back, lips trembling, not from fear, but fury at losing control. "The board will hear of this." "They'll hear more than that," I said. "They'll hear the recording." I gestured to the security cam, still glowing above her shoulder, the same one linked to my cloud redundancy system. For the first time, she looked uncertain, and as the thunder rolled again, I whispered, more to myself than her, "Never again will a switch decide who lives or dies under your rules." I closed the door, sealing out the storm. Hannah gasped. I knelt beside her, gripping her hand. "We're back online, help's coming." But as I looked at the screen, a single error message pulsed. "Grid interference detected. External override active." The board chair wasn't done yet. By morning, the storm had passed, But the silence it left behind was worse. Our porch light flickered against damp pavement, reflecting the crime scene tape that Margaret Corbin herself had authorized. She'd sent HOA security, 2 volunteers with matching polos, to secure the premises. Translation, watch me break. When I stepped outside, one of them flinched. Dr. Pierce, the board chair said no tampering until her review. Tampering? I pointed to the power line she'd severed. You mean the one that almost killed my wife and child? The enforcer in crimson appeared from behind her SUV, immaculate as ever, heels clicking against the driveway like a metronome for madness. Hyperbole doesn't suit you, doctor. The system was flagged for unauthorized modification. You mean life support? She smiled faintly, eyes cold. Let's not dramatize. HOA rules don't bend for personal stories. I studied her, the clipboard queen in her element, surrounded by printed notices and laminated warnings. She thrived on authority symbols, stamped seals, clipboards, and silence that made people feel small. People nearly died last night, I said quietly. And you're still hiding behind paper. She tilted her head, tone almost gentle. Maybe you shouldn't have violated Article 12. Visual uniformity protects property value. When you disregard aesthetics, everyone pays. That was Margaret Corbin in one sentence. Morality reduced to market value. Inside, Hannah slept, pale but stable. The hospital techs had left hours ago after confirming our generator's readings. Without my manual override, we'd have been another statistic buried under HOA jargon. Margaret, I said, forcing calm, the state inspector's already been notified. There's a formal complaint under your name. Her eyebrow twitched, the first fracture in her armor. For what? Enforcing code? You think bureaucrats care about domestic inconveniences? Maybe not, I replied. But they care about liability. That word hung in the air like gunpowder. The tyrant in heels lowered her clipboard slowly. Are you threatening me, doctor? I took a breath. I'm reminding you that last night's blackout affected 12 homes, 2 oxygen systems, 1 dialysis unit, and 1 woman in active labor. The board made that decision under your authorization. It's already in the log. Her jaw tightened. That file's confidential. Not anymore. The officer of rules exhaled, stepping closer. You have no idea how many people complained about you before this incident. You flaunt exceptions, sheds, generators, custom wiring. The community feels unsafe. Unsafe from power outages or from you? The question cracked her composure. For a moment, something almost human flickered in her eyes. Fatigue, doubt, maybe guilt. But she buried it fast. You've turned your wife's condition into a spectacle. Don't weaponize sympathy, Dr. Pierce. It's beneath you. That line stung. Because beneath all the control, she knew how to target truth. Hannah's pregnancy had been complicated, high risk, fragile. We'd fought for years to make it this far, and Margaret had nearly undone it with a line item. Before I could answer, Laura Chen pulled up in her city vehicle, silver, unmarked, efficient. The conflicted witness had arrived. She stepped out slowly, neutral stance, body tense as a wire. Morning, folks, she said. Just need to verify the incident report. Margaret's tone softened instantly. Officer Chen, lovely to see you. You'll find everything in order. Laura gave a tight nod, but met my eyes briefly. There was something unsaid there, something uneasy. I'll need access to the breaker unit, she said. The board forbids it, Margaret snapped. It's a municipal request, Laura countered, not optional. The clipboard queen's expression froze. She knew overstepping a city directive could cost her position. Then proceed, she said, voice like ice. Laura followed me to the junction box, where I showed her the tamper mark. She bent down, studying the seal. That's not a standard disconnect tag, she murmured. Looks like a manual override. Margaret called out from behind us. Do not speculate beyond your jurisdiction, officer. Laura straightened slowly. Jurisdiction changes when public safety's compromised. The air between them turned electric. For the first time, Margaret Corbin didn't look like the unshakable enforcer in crimson. She looked cornered, and I realized something. She wasn't protecting the HOA. She was protecting herself. As Laura took photos for her report, Margaret turned to me and whispered, "You've made an enemy you can't contain." I met her gaze. Good. That means you finally see me as one. She smirked faintly. Enemies fall harder than neighbors, Doctor. Lightning flickered again across the horizon, silent but sharp. The storm wasn't over, just quieter, and for the first time, I knew she was afraid, not of exposure, of losing control, because control was all she had left. By the next afternoon, the HOA bulletin board outside the clubhouse looked like a war map. Margaret Corbin's notice. Pending investigation, unauthorized power system at 112 Willow Crest Lane, hung dead center, laminated, pristine, and signed with her looping initials. The officer of rules hadn't just doubled down, she'd gone public. I stood across the cul-de-sac, holding a cup of cold coffee that had long stopped tasting like anything. Every neighbor who passed read the paper, then turned away before our eyes could meet. That's how control worked in this place. Silence sold cheaper than truth. Laura Chen's city car was parked 2 houses down. She sat inside, hands gripping the steering wheel, unmoving. She hadn't filed the full report yet, and I knew why. She was stuck between the law and her mortgage. The HOA was her employer. The city was her duty. I walked over and tapped on her window. She rolled it halfway. Still deciding which side pays better? I asked softly. Her eyes flicked toward the clubhouse where the board chair stood, clipboard in hand, directing 2 men to remove my generator warning sign. You shouldn't talk to me like that here, she whispered. They're watching. Yeah, I said, nodding toward the enforcer in crimson. That's her favorite sport. Laura hesitated, voice low. You need to know something, but I shouldn't even have it. She slid an envelope toward me, creased, unmarked. Read it later, somewhere quiet. Before I could answer, Margaret Corbin approached, heels slicing the air like punctuation. Officer Chen, she called. I hope you're not consorting with violators. Laura's shoulders stiffened. Just verifying statements, ma'am. The clipboard queen smiled thinly. Verifications don't require envelopes. Her gaze dropped to the car door still ajar. The wind caught her hair, and for the first time, I saw a flash of unease in her perfect composure. She hated not knowing things. Step back, doctor, she ordered. I folded my arms. You already cut my power, posted my name, and poisoned the neighbors. What's next? Revoke oxygen privileges? The tyrant in heels took a deliberate step closer. Mockery doesn't exempt you from enforcement. The board's audit shows 23 unauthorized adjustments to your electrical grid. That's sabotage by our definition. It's called maintenance, I replied. Something you'd understand if you'd ever touched a circuit. Her lips tightened. Arrogance is an ugly defense. Laura shifted slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of her badge. Let's keep it professional, please. But Margaret Corbin wasn't built for de-escalation. Professionalism, she said, is knowing when to obey. And right now, officer, you're out of alignment. That last line hit harder than it sounded. It was a warning, a reminder that the HOA's influence reached further than city walls. Laura's pulse quickened. I could see it in her throat. She turned abruptly and pretended to take a call, retreating toward her vehicle. The officer of rules followed her with her eyes, a smile curling like smoke. Intimidation works until someone records it, I said. Margaret's gaze returned to me, steady, unblinking. Recording? Doctor, paranoia isn't a defense either. Maybe not, I replied, but it's an excellent survival instinct. She leaned closer, voice dropping. Do you know why rules exist? To protect people from themselves. You think you're saving your wife. You're not. You're teaching your child to defy order. That one cut deep. The woman who nearly killed my family now dared to talk about lessons. I exhaled slowly. If order means watching people suffer quietly, then yes, I'm teaching her to defy it. The board chair turned sharply and walked back toward the clubhouse, coat snapping behind her like a flag in retreat. But her retreat wasn't defeat. It was recalculation. As she disappeared inside, I looked back at Laura, who sat motionless again, staring at her own reflection in the windshield. I saw guilt there, a flicker of rebellion still caged by fear. Inside the envelope she'd slipped me, I later found a copy of the HOA's internal memo, time-stamped from the night of the blackout. It stated that the power cut had been executed manually by directive of Chair M. Corbin, despite 2 warnings from their own electrician advising against it. She knew. She'd ordered it herself. The discovery wasn't victory. It was gasoline on the fire, because now I had proof, and proof, in Willowcrest Estates, was more dangerous than guilt. That night, as the wind pressed against the windows, I whispered to Hannah, sleeping soundly for the first time in days, "She's not stopping, so neither am I." Outside, the porch light flickered again, once, twice, and went dark. The storm had returned, only this time it wore a crimson blazer. By dawn, Willowcrest looked peaceful again. But peace here was camouflage. Beneath the manicured lawns and perfect symmetry, tension pulsed like live current under wet soil. The board chair had spent the entire night sending out new notices. Power system review, community safety audit, behavioral violation pending. Every single one had my name on it. I stood on my porch, reading the pile of warnings that had accumulated overnight, each stamped with her elegant initials. The officer of rules wasn't just punishing me anymore. She was making an example. Down the street, a few neighbors peeked through their curtains, the same ones who once waved every morning. Now they turned away as if my family carried contagion. Margaret Corbin didn't need to shout. She just needed to isolate. That was her real method of control, social exile disguised as policy. The enforcer in crimson arrived around 9, heels clicking like metronomic gunfire. She didn't even glance my way as she walked toward the utility post. "I'll be supervising today's inspection personally," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I smiled faintly. "You mean supervising damage control?" Her eyes met mine, steady, calculated, rehearsed. "Some of us prefer order to chaos." "Funny," I said. "That's what dictators always say before a coup." The clipboard queen ignored the comment, waving a technician forward. "Mark any unauthorized connections," she ordered. "Photograph everything." The man hesitated, glancing at me. "Ma'am, this line looks medical grade. Are you sure we're—" "Proceed," she interrupted, voice sharp as glass. I stepped closer. "Touch that wire, and you'll be personally responsible for obstructing emergency medical equipment." Margaret Corbin turned, her expression perfectly calm. "Doctor, emotional manipulation won't protect you this time." "Neither will ignorance," I replied. The standoff drew a small crowd, neighbors, phones in hand, pretending to walk their dogs or water plants. I recognized fear disguised as curiosity. That was her audience. She wanted witnesses to her power. From the corner of my eye, I saw Laura Chen watching again, parked discreetly near the entrance. She hadn't come out of her car, but the tension in her posture was visible even from here, one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other pressed against her mouth. The tyrant in heels leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You think you're untouchable because your wife works for the state. But every record, every purchase, every policy you've ever ignored, I can weaponize them all." That was her gift. Weaponizing compliance. I exhaled slowly. "You ever wonder what happens when the wrong person fights someone who actually knows the system? Enlighten me." I stopped playing. "Defense?" Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're bluffing." I nodded toward the street lamp across from us. "You see that? That's part of the emergency grid my firm designed. The Inspector General's office has back-end access to every data relay tied to your HOA's energy network." Her brow furrowed. Meaning every unauthorized disconnection you ordered last week left a digital fingerprint. The clipboard queen blinked once, then regained her composure. "Even if that's true, you'd never risk exposing community infrastructure. You'd lose your license." "That's what you're counting on," I said. "But I already reported it anonymously. Someone else is coming." For the first time, she hesitated. A subtle motion, the way her fingers tightened around her pen, the tiny pause before speaking. Fear, microscopic, but real. "Lies," she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. "You're just trying to intimidate me." I stepped back. "No, Margaret, I'm just giving you a chance to stop." Her expression hardened. "You underestimate how far I'll go to protect this community." "No," I said quietly. "You overestimate how long you'll keep control of it." Behind her, Laura finally stepped out of her car. She looked pale, conflicted. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "there's been an official request for your compliance documents from the State Oversight Office. They'll be here within 48 hours. Margaret's face froze, eyes darting between us. "That's impossible." Laura's tone softened. They cited public safety. The enforcer in crimson didn't respond. Her silence said enough. I met Laura's gaze briefly, a silent acknowledgement that the first crack had opened. But even as Margaret turned and walked away, heels striking the pavement harder now, I knew she wasn't finished. People like her never retreat. They reload. That night, as the neighborhood lights blinked in perfect synchronization, I checked my surveillance feed. The footage showed her car idling outside our property for 23 minutes past midnight. She wasn't just watching anymore. She was planning her next move, and this time, I was ready for it. Sleep became optional after that night. Every noise outside felt intentional. A car door, a motion light, a whisper of tires on asphalt. I'd stopped dreaming. Now I analyzed. By sunrise, I was combing through the data feed from the grid I'd once built. Years ago, my firm had contracted with the state's Energy Oversight Bureau to test resilience systems for neighborhoods just like Willow Crest. Every node reported pulse readings to a secure server, a feature Margaret Corbin clearly hadn't known existed. When I opened the logs from the blackout, I found it. A manual override at 11:42 p.m. The timestamp matched the exact minute Hannah's monitor had flatlined. The board chair had flipped the switch herself. I sent the encrypted report to my old supervisor, a field agent still active at the Bureau. His response came fast. If your data's clean, this isn't an HOA issue anymore. This is state obstruction. I leaned back, heart pounding. For the first time, the ground shifted under her, not me. But Margaret Corbin never allowed ground to shift for long. By 9 a.m., she was back in full parade, the enforcer in crimson with her signature sunglasses and a crowd of homeowners behind her. She stood on the community lawn, addressing them like a preacher at a rally. "The doctor's accusations are malicious," she declared. "Our board acted lawfully to maintain safety. Any claim otherwise threatens the reputation of Willow Crest Estates." Applause followed, hesitant, nervous, rehearsed. Fear makes great choreography. I watched from the sidewalk, unseen but not unnoticed. The clipboard queen knew exactly where my line of sight would be. She angled herself toward me, mid-speech, smile sharpened to a blade. She ended with, "We'll continue our audit until every irregularity is corrected, even if it means removing problem elements." "Problem elements," I muttered. "That's new." Laura Chen stood at the edge of the crowd, half in uniform, half in guilt. When our eyes met, she didn't nod or wave. She just clenched her jaw, a silent admission that she'd read the same state request I had. After the crowd dispersed, Margaret approached, clipboard pressed tight against her chest like armor. "You're escalating," she said flatly. "No," I replied. "You already did that when you lied to the inspectors." The officer of rules tilted her head. "Inspectors are bureaucrats. They move slow. I move first." "That confidence," I said, "sounds a lot like panic." Her expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened. "You think this is about a power line? This is about control. If I lose it here, I lose it everywhere." "You already lost it," I said quietly. "You just haven't felt the fall yet." She exhaled through her nose, a slow, deliberate breath, then smiled. "Be careful, doctor. You're good at fixing circuits. People, not so much." It was a threat dressed as pity. That evening, as I checked the monitors again, a new anomaly flashed: unauthorized access to the HOA's digital platform. Someone was copying internal documents from the chair's account. I traced the signal. It wasn't external. It came from inside the city database. Laura Chen. She'd decided to act. The data packet contained proof of financial manipulation, maintenance funds rerouted to contractual consulting, all signed off by the tyrant in the heels herself. But what caught my eye wasn't the money. It was the approval timestamp, 2 days before the blackout, and the attached note: "Initiate test shutdown, verify compliance response." A test. She hadn't panicked during the power. Loss. She'd planned it. I sent the file to the Inspector General's server under whistleblower protocol and encrypted the chain. Once filed, it couldn't be withdrawn or altered, not even by the HOA's counsel. At 11:10 p.m., my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "You think you're clever, doctor? You just declared war." No signature needed. I looked outside. Her car was there again, idling beneath the street lamp like a sentinel wrapped in shadow. The headlights blinked twice, once for warning, once for promise, then vanished down the cul-de-sac. For a moment, the silence felt absolute. Then my phone rang again. This time, the Bureau. "We got your data," the agent said. "Dr. Pierce, stay where you are. State inspectors will arrive by morning." As the line clicked off, I stared at the empty street and whispered, "Morning's too late," because I knew Margaret Corbin wouldn't wait that long to strike back. And when she did, she'd make sure the lights went out for real. The night before the inspectors arrived, Willow Crest stopped pretending to be civilized. Every porch light flickered in eerie rhythm, some coincidence of wiring or warning. Either way, I didn't sleep. Neither did Hannah. By 3 a.m., my cameras picked up a figure pacing the sidewalk, a flash of crimson in the darkness. Margaret Corbin herself. She paused under our security lamp, staring straight into the lens like she knew exactly where it was. Then, with one precise motion, she held up a letter. HOA Stationery. She slid it beneath our door. The board chair never texted threats. She preferred parchment and ink, the old-fashioned intimidation of authority. I opened the envelope with a gloved hand. Emergency disciplinary hearing, 8:01 a.m., mandatory attendance. Failure to comply will constitute admission of guilt. Guilt. She wrote it as if it were pre-decided. I felt Hannah's hand on my shoulder. Her voice was calm but trembling. "Sam, she's not stopping, is she?" "No," I said quietly, "but neither am I." When morning came, the HOA hall looked like a courtroom built by people who'd only seen them in movies. Polished floors, fake ferns, fluorescent justice. The enforcer in crimson sat at the head table, flanked by 2 silent board members who looked more like hostages than colleagues. "Dr. Pierce," she greeted, her tone dipped in polite venom. "You stand accused of endangering community infrastructure and falsifying technical records. How do you plead?" "Unimpressed." A murmur rippled through the audience, neighbors pretending not to enjoy the spectacle. The clipboard queen adjusted her glasses. "We can add contempt to the minutes if you like." I folded my arms. "Minutes imply fairness. This feels more like theater." Her eyes glinted. "Then perform well." The tyrant in heels gestured to a projector. An image flashed up. One of my security grid screenshots, cropped, altered. "Here," she said, "we have evidence of unauthorized monitoring equipment. You were spying on residents." "That's false," I said. "That image is manipulated." "Objection noted," she said smoothly, turning to the board. "But not sustained." Every word was choreographed. She was writing her narrative in real time. Then the door opened. Laura Chen entered, still in partial uniform. The room stiffened. Margaret's smile faltered just long enough to register shock before she caught herself. "Officer Chen," the board chair said, "this is a private meeting." Laura held up a file. "Not anymore. The Inspector General's office issued an emergency injunction. This hearing violates state oversight protocol." For the first time, the clipboard queen lost her rhythm. "You're mistaken," she said, voice tight. "No," Laura replied. "I'm tired." She placed the folder on the table, sliding it forward like a verdict. "These are your own financial logs. You authorized power cuts marked as safety drills, but they coincided with individual residents under disciplinary notice. That's targeted harassment." Gasps, phones lifted. Margaret Corbin's jaw flexed. "This is confidential information." "Not anymore," Laura said softly. The officer of rules rose from her seat, posture rigid but trembling underneath. "Do you understand the damage you're causing? To yourself?" Laura's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "Maybe, but I'd rather lose a job than watch another family lose power while their child fights to breathe." Silence fell heavy as thunder. I stepped forward, voice steady. "This is over, Margaret." The enforcer in crimson turned to me, her control cracking into something darker. "You think this saves you? You think one file erases your violations?" "No," I said, "but it exposes yours." Her lips parted, but no sound came. For a fraction of a second, I saw what she hid so well, fear dressed in authority. Then she did something I didn't expect. She smiled. "You really believe bureaucracy will protect you?" "Doctor, I built this neighborhood's bylaws. I am the fine print." "And you just signed your own clause," I said. She slammed her clipboard shut and stormed out, crimson coat sweeping behind like a closing curtain. Outside, news vans already lined the street. The bureau had moved faster than she thought. As Laura and I stepped out into the sunlight, I glanced toward the gate where the community's power meters blinked faintly. For the first time, the readings were stable. No interference, no tampering. But I knew better. Margaret Corbin wasn't defeated. She was regrouping, because tyrants don't vanish when exposed. They retreat, recalculate, and come back wearing new authority. And the next time she did, it wouldn't be through wires. It would be through people. The morning after the hearing, the neighborhood felt eerily quiet. Too quiet, for a place that had just witnessed its queen fall from her throne. But silence, I'd learned, wasn't peace. It was plotting. Margaret Corbin hadn't been seen since the hearing, but her absence screamed louder than her presence. The board chair had always ruled through visibility, her sharp red coat, her clipboard, her shadow falling across every driveway like a warning. Now that she'd vanished, the community didn't know whether to relax or panic. By noon, I got my answer. Laura Chen arrived at my door. No uniform, no badge, just exhaustion painted under her eyes. She held a small flash drive between her fingers, like it was radioactive. "She's going to destroy everything," she said, without greeting. I motioned her inside. "You mean reputation or evidence?" "Both." She paced the living room, the afternoon light slicing across her face. After the hearing, the enforcer in crimson called an emergency board session. She's planning to wipe all digital records before the state team gets full access. I leaned forward. "How long do we have?" "Maybe hours." The clipboard queen wasn't running. She was erasing her trail. Laura stopped pacing. "You need to understand something, Sam. I was part of this. I enforced her orders. I signed off on the routine safety checks." Her voice broke on the last word. I met her eyes. "You didn't know what she was doing." "I suspected," she said quietly, "but I convinced myself it was protocol. She always made it sound like we were protecting the neighborhood. That was Margaret Corbin's real gift, moral camouflage. She made cruelty look like civic duty." "Why come clean now?" I asked. Laura hesitated, then reached into her jacket. She pulled out a folded sheet, an internal memo with the HOA seal. "Because of this." At the top was a line of text. "Emergency Compliance Program, Phase 2. Below it, my family's address. I froze. "She's targeting us again." Laura nodded. "She filed a petition to revoke your residency privileges under medical equipment non-compliance. She wants you evicted before the investigation can finalize. The tyrant in heels was cornered, and cornered predators lash out." "Give me the drive," I said. Laura hesitated. "There's more. You need to see it before you send it." We connected it to my secure terminal. A series of encrypted audio files appeared, time-stamped over the last 6 months. I opened the first one. Margaret's voice filled the room, calm, deliberate, chilling. "If they won't follow rules willingly, we'll teach them obedience through inconvenience." The next clip: "I don't need to break laws. I just need them too afraid to challenge one." I felt the room tilt. These weren't just policy abuses. They were psychological warfare, recorded and dated. Laura pressed her palms together. "That's why I couldn't stay silent anymore. Every one of those recordings was stored on her personal drive. I made copies before she realized." "Laura," I said slowly, "you just ended her career." She shook her head. "No, Sam, you're about to." The weight of her words settled like thunder in my chest. I turned to my laptop, opening a direct transmission line to the Inspector General's secure evidence vault. As the files uploaded, a progress bar crawled across the screen. 20%, 40%, 65%. Then it froze. "Error. Connection interrupted." My stomach dropped. Laura leaned over. "She's intercepting it. She still has network control over the HOA hub." The officer of rules was fighting back in real time. I quickly rerouted the upload through a private satellite relay, the kind only state contractors and emergency systems had access to. "Try now," I muttered. The bar resumed. 70%, 85%, 100%. Success. The upload was live, irreversible. For the first time in days, I exhaled. Laura sat back, trembling. "You think that's enough?" I nodded slowly. "It's not just enough, it's everything." Outside, a car door slammed. Both of us turned toward the window. A familiar red silhouette stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed. phone pressed to her ear. The enforcer in crimson had found us. I opened the door before she could knock. Margaret's expression was pure composure layered over fury. "You think leaking stolen data saves you? You've committed a felony, Doctor." "No," I said. "You did. I just forwarded it." Her eyes flickered. Not fear, not rage, calculation. "You're making a mistake." I smiled faintly. "I made one. I underestimated you. Won't happen again." For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The air between us felt electric, charged, dangerous. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "This neighborhood was mine long before you got here. Don't forget who writes the rules." I met her gaze. "And don't forget who rewrote them." She turned, heels striking the pavement like a countdown. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning its public phase. By morning, Willow Crest looked polished again, the kind of surface perfection that hides rot underneath. Lawns mowed, flags raised, the air unnervingly still. But, I'd learned, still water only looks calm until it pulls you under. Margaret Corbin wasn't retreating. She was rebranding. By 8 a.m., every resident inbox pinged with a glossy statement from the board chair, Community Integrity Division. She claimed she was cooperating fully with state authorities, while condemning false accusations engineered by a resident with technical access to private systems. That resident was me. Within minutes, posts appeared on the neighborhood network, curated comments praising her leadership, others warning that my data tampering endangered property values. It was a smear campaign disguised as civic order. The enforcer in crimson had turned perception into a weapon. Hannah read one of these posts aloud, her voice trembling. "He staged the blackout to extort attention." I took her phone gently. That's what they do when they're losing. They rewrite the crime scene. Still, it hit her. Our neighbors weren't just distant anymore. They were complicit spectators. Laura Chen called an hour later. "She's meeting with the HOA's legal consultant this afternoon," she said. "He's the one handling media containment. If we can expose that meeting, it proves she's coordinating obstruction." I nodded. "Where?" "The clubhouse. 2 p.m. sharp." "And Sam?" She hesitated. "I'd be ready. She's not playing defense anymore." The clipboard queen didn't just play to win. She played to humiliate. I spent the next 2 hours wiring a covert relay through the security grid, one of the same circuits she'd commandeered weeks ago. I rerouted the feed through a state-approved oversight channel. The inspectors would get a live stream directly from the HOA meeting room. No leaks, no edits. At 1:45, I parked across from the clubhouse, engine off, rain spattering the windshield like Morse code. Through the tinted glass, I watched her arrive, crimson coat gleaming against gray skies, phone glued to her ear. She looked untouchable, like a headline in motion. Inside, she greeted the consultant with that trademark smirk. "We'll frame it as emotional distress," the tyrant in heels said, her tone ice smooth. The doctor's wife's condition compromised his judgment. Sympathy beats evidence every time. My jaw tightened. She wasn't just defending herself. She was weaponizing Hannah's labor trauma. I texted Laura, "Feed live, begin capture." For 30 minutes, I recorded her orchestrating lies with surgical precision, instructing subordinates to delete cloud records, ordering the PR team to shift focus toward domestic instability. Every word streamed straight into the Inspector General's evidence vault. At 2:31, she paused mid-sentence, eyes flicking toward the camera dome. "He's watching," she whispered. The officer of rules tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Good. Let him." She looked directly at the lens, a quiet dare. I whispered to myself, "Challenge accepted." By evening, the Bureau confirmed receipt of the footage. They'd prepare warrants by dawn. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling she was baiting me, that she wanted this escalation. And I was right. At 9 p.m., my security alarm tripped. Someone had bypassed the front gate sensor. I checked the feed. The camera image flickered, static-lined. Then her voice came through my intercom, distorted but unmistakable. "You're trespassing in your own house now, Sam." I froze. She'd hacked my own relay. Her laugh bled through the speakers. "You think I'm scared of state oversight? I am the oversight." Before I could reply, the system went dark. Every monitor, every device, offline. "Ow." sprinted to the breaker panel. Hannah called out from the hall, voice shaking. "Sam, the lights!" "They'll come back," I said, though I wasn't sure. Then, through the window, headlights swept across our yard. Unmarked sedans, tinted windows. For a moment, I feared they were her people. But when the doors opened, I saw government jackets, the Inspector General's task team. Timing, perfect. The clipboard queen had overplayed her hand. As the agents fanned out, one approached me. "Dr. Pierce, we have warrants to seize HOA equipment and financial servers. You'll guide us to the control hub." I noted, exhaling. "It's inside the boardroom firewall. I already mapped it." Behind them, Margaret Corbin appeared at her doorway, pale under the porch light, but still composed. She raised her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "You can't audit private property without my authorization." The lead agent flashed his badge. "Ma'am, your authorization expired 3 hours ago." For the first time, the enforcer in crimson stepped back. Just half an inch, but enough to show she felt the shift. Inside, her empire was unraveling. The moment the agents crossed her threshold, the mask of civility began to crack. Margaret Corbin stood at the center of her marble-tiled foyer like a monarch defending her crumbling castle. Her crimson coat glowed against the sterile white light from the bureau floodlamps. "You're violating homeowner privacy," she snapped, voice steady but her hands betraying the tremor beneath her control. The lead investigator ignored her. "Per warrant, every system, file, and relay linked to the HOA central network will be collected." I followed behind, scanning the layout. The board chair had hidden her nerve center beneath layers of architectural perfection, concealed panels, mirrored surfaces, touch-activated locks. It was both beautiful and deceitful. When the agents uncovered her command terminal, a wall-length console disguised behind cabinetry, Margaret stepped forward like a mother defending her child. "That's private correspondence." "No," I said evenly. "That's a control hub with residence access codes, energy cut permissions, and data logs you falsified." Her eyes cut toward me, sharp as glass. "You still think you're the hero here, don't you?" I met her gaze. "No, just the witness." The enforcer in crimson laughed, a single brittle note. "You think bureaucrats will protect you? The moment I'm gone, this place will collapse. Power lines, permits, maintenance contracts, everything runs through me." "Then I guess we'll rebuild without corruption," I said quietly. She sneered. "You can't rebuild loyalty." The clipboard queen turned toward the crowd forming outside, neighbors drawn by the flashing lights and murmurs of scandal. She straightened, raising her voice with theatrical poise. "Look at this. They're invading our homes. Now, all because one man couldn't follow the rules." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Doubt. Division. She was still weaponizing the one thing she'd always mastered: optics. The tyrant in heels spun toward the agents, fire in her tone. "You can't touch those drives without legal counsel present." The lead investigator calmly slid a document toward her. "You waived that right when you initiated power control protocols under false emergency status." She froze. For a brief moment, the entire act fell away, leaving only exhaustion. "You don't understand what this neighborhood would become without order," she murmured. I did. That was the tragedy. She believed her own tyranny was protection. As the agents secured devices, I guided one of them toward the backup relay room. I'd designed parts of it years ago during my volunteer stint as a systems consultant. I knew exactly where she kept the mirrored data drives. Inside, the hum of cooling fans filled the air. I pointed. "Behind that panel, she runs duplicates of every HOA file, shadow backups. She planned to wipe the public records and restore her version later." The officer pried open the casing. A cascade of LEDs flickered. "Got them." That's when the lights dimmed, not out, just low enough to change the atmosphere. "She's doing it again," I muttered. Margaret Corbin's voice echoed from the hallway intercom, steady, taunting. "Careful with my systems, doctor. One wrong keystroke and this entire grid goes dark for good." The officer swore under his breath. "She still has partial control?" "Only manual override," I said. "She's trying to scare us." I leaned into the mic by the relay board. "Margaret, the Inspector General's network is isolated. You can't touch them now." A pause. Then a low chuckle. "Can I?" The power blinked, once, twice, and then every screen in the room filled with her face, captured from a security cam feed. "You're dismantling something bigger than rules," she said. "You're dismantling legacy. Your legacy ends with accountability," I replied. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, with visible restraint, she turned toward the agents and said, "Do what you must, but when the lawyers finish, you'll wish you'd never moved here." The clipboard queen stepped aside, folding her arms, letting the agents pass. It wasn't surrender, it was strategy. She wanted to look persecuted, framed, righteous. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. Reporters had arrived, tripods, microphones, flashes. Neighbors whispered names, pointing at us like we were characters in a scandal they had only half believed until now. Hannah stood beside me, her hand trembling in mine. "You think this is really the end?" "No," I said. "It's the beginning of exposure." The enforcer in crimson watched from her porch, backlit by the lightning sky, her expression unreadable. Even now, cornered. And stripped of her crown, she still looked powerful, because power wasn't in her title. It was in her conviction that she was untouchable, but that illusion was breaking, line by line, bite by bite, and by dawn, the world would see what she really built beneath the manicured calm of Willow Crest. Sleep was a rumor that night. Every sound in the house, the tick of the thermostat, the hum of the fridge, felt amplified, like the walls themselves were bracing for what was coming. The storm outside hadn't stopped since the agents left. Wind clawed at the shutters, rain rattled like static against glass. Hannah sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes locked on the flickering news feed that now carried our names. Margaret Corbin had gone public. The broadcast opened with her standing beneath a canopy of umbrellas, reporters pressing close. Her crimson blazer glistened under camera lights like armor. "I've always served this community," she declared, "and when power-hungry residents twist tragedy into political spectacle, we all suffer." The enforcer in crimson looked radiant, grief-polished, camera-trained, terrifyingly composed. She even brought an elderly couple on stage to vouch for her kindness. It was theater, and she knew every cue. Hannah muted the volume. "She's turning them back to her side," she whispered. "She's buying time," I said. "But tomorrow, the evidence goes public at the board hearing." Still, a part of me knew Margaret wasn't the kind of opponent who waited for judgment. She made her own courts. At 2 a.m., my phone vibrated. An encrypted ping from Laura Chen. Incoming leak detected from HOA Terminal Number 3. I grabbed my jacket and drove through the rain. The streets of Willow Crest shimmered under sodium light, empty except for one red silhouette near the clubhouse gate. The clipboard queen stood there, motionless, umbrella tilted. I pulled up beside her. "You're trespassing, Margaret," she smiled faintly. "And yet, here you are too. What did you do?" "Archive justice," she said, tapping her tablet. "You think you've cornered me with evidence? I've mirrored it all, and added yours." "What?" She turned the screen toward me. My email thread with the state liaison, heavily edited, spliced to look like I'd doctored data. "They'll see what I want them to see," the tyrant in heels said softly. "Tomorrow, you're the fraud." I stepped closer. "You forged a life-threatening blackout to prove power. You endangered my family. That won't vanish behind one press release." Her smile flickered. "You think this is about your wife's labor? It was about order, about keeping chaos out of our streets." "Order isn't cruelty," I snapped. The officer of rules leaned in until I could see rain beads on her lashes. "Cruelty works." For a long moment, the only sound was the storm pounding the asphalt. Then she stepped back, composed, again. "Good night, doctor. Try to rest before your cross-examination." She vanished into the rain, leaving a chill heavier than the wind itself. I drove straight to Laura's place. The inspector was already there, bleary-eyed but alert, working off a backup network. "She's leaking falsified data through local media servers," Laura said. "If she controls perception, the hearing's useless." "Then we change perception," I replied. "How?" I pointed to the evidence logs. "We stream everything, raw, unedited, from the state terminal to the community screens at the hearing. No spin, no edits, live." Laura frowned. "That's risky. That's necessary." By dawn, we'd rigged a direct feed from the oversight servers. The moment the hearing started, every resident would see the recordings themselves. The power cut order, the intercepted emails, the manipulation. No voiceover, just truth. As the first light broke through the storm clouds, I watched Hannah asleep on the couch, hand resting on her stomach, peace finally softening her face. That sight alone reminded me why this fight mattered. Outside, Willowcrest glistened, washed clean, but not innocent. The boardroom would open in 3 hours. I stood by the window, watching the last of the storm clouds move east, whispering to myself, one final day. Down the street, a figure in crimson paused under a street lamp. Even from a distance, I could sense her watching, calm, calculating, waiting for her next move. Margaret Corbin wasn't beaten yet. She was resetting the board, and tomorrow, one of us wouldn't walk away with a title. By the time I reached the community hall, the crowd stretched halfway to the parking lot. Neighbors, reporters, even families from nearby developments. Everyone wanted to witness the fall of Willowcrest's queen. Inside, the air was dense with whispers and camera clicks. The fluorescent lights hummed above rows of folding chairs, each filled with faces that once smiled at me, then turned away when fear became fashion. Now they were here for spectacle, justice or chaos, whichever came first. At the front, under the HOA seal, stood Margaret Corbin, poised, immaculate, terrifyingly calm. The crimson blazer was back, always the uniform of power. She looked up as I entered, lips curving into something between disdain and amusement. "Dr. Pierce," the board chair said coolly. "I trust you came to watch the hearing, not disrupt it." "Wouldn't dream of it," I replied. The moderator, a state-appointed inspector, cleared his throat. "Today's session concerns allegations of misconduct, data manipulation, and misuse of authority by the Willowcrest Homeowners Association." Margaret's smile didn't move. "Allegations," she repeated softly, "not facts." The enforcer in crimson turned to face the audience, posture flawless. "This community deserves stability. What's happening now is not about truth, it's about revenge. A neighbor exploiting tragedy for personal gain." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I glanced toward the back row where Laura Chen stood beside the technicians. She gave a discreet nod. The stream was ready, the inspector continued. "Dr. Pierce, you requested authorization to present supporting evidence via live transmission. That request has been granted." The clipboard queen stiffened. "Objection. That data's unverifiable." The inspector ignored her. "Proceed." Laura hit the command key. Instantly, the massive projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. The crowd gasped as Margaret's own voice filled the hall. Recordings from her private meeting 2 days earlier. The doctor's wife's condition compromised his judgment. Sympathy beats evidence every time. The tyrant in heels froze mid-step. Her eyes darted toward the source, then back to me. Gasps echoed across the room. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. The next clip rolled. "Delete the backups. If state regulators dig, I want one version left. Mine." Someone shouted, "You said you never touched the files." The officer of rules clenched her fists at her sides, trembling but still trying to look in control. "Those recordings are edited," she snapped. "He spliced them." I stepped forward, calm and deliberate. The full data chain is authenticated by the Inspector General's servers. Every timestamp verified, every relay traced. The truth doesn't need editing. Her voice cracked, just slightly. "You think one dramatic stunt absolves your failure as a resident? This isn't about my house," I said quietly. "It's about your empire." The inspector turned to her. "Ms. Corbin, are you denying the authenticity of your communications?" Margaret hesitated. The silence that followed was louder than any confession. Finally, she straightened, defiance returning. "I kept this neighborhood safe. I enforced order when no one else would. You can strip my title, but you can't replace me." A man from the audience shouted, "You cut power to a house during childbirth." Another added, "You threatened families." The room fractured. Anger, disbelief, vindication. Years of resentment spilling all at once. The enforcer in crimson slammed her hand against the podium. "You needed me," she yelled. "Without me, Willowcrest would drown in chaos." I took a step forward, voice low but carrying. "No, Margaret, it already did. Under you." For a moment, she just stared, all pride, no air. Then she laughed, the sound brittle, desperate. Do you really think this ends with your little presentation? I have attorneys, contacts, the inspector interrupted. Not anymore. As of this morning, the state has revoked your HOA certification. You're suspended pending investigation. Her expression shattered. You can't. I can, he said firmly. And I just did. Margaret Corbin, the clipboard queen, the tyrant in heels, the enforcer in crimson, stumbled back, the color draining from her face. The crowd erupted, half in shock, half in relief. I watched her grip the edge of the podium for balance. For the first time, her voice came out small. You think this is justice? This is humiliation. I met her eyes. Sometimes they're the same thing. The inspector signaled security. 2 officers approached. She didn't fight. She just straightened her jacket, lifted her chin, and walked out under the blinding lights. A dethroned monarch, swallowed by her own stage. The audience stood silent as she disappeared. Only then did applause break, hesitant at first, then swelling, uncontainable. Hannah appeared in the doorway, tears shining, but smiling. I reached for her hand. It's over, I whispered. Not yet, she said softly. But it's ending right. Outside, thunder rolled again. Not chaos this time, but closure. Tomorrow, Willow Crest would wake without a ruler. The crowd didn't disperse right away. Even after Margaret Corbin was escorted out, people stood frozen in the hall, whispering to one another as if afraid to speak too loudly in the absence of her authority. Power vacuums have their own gravity. I stepped outside into the cold dawn. The sky was pale gray, rain still clinging to the asphalt, the scent of ozone sharp in the air. Willow Crest felt different, lighter somehow, though the ghosts of her rules still clung to every mailbox, every trimmed hedge, every uniform fence line. Hannah joined me, her hand slipping into mine. You think it's really over? She asked. Not over, I said. Just beginning again. Behind us, the inspector sealed the clubhouse doors. The evidence would go to state archives, but the story, that was ours now. By mid-morning, news vans lined the entrance. Reporters swarmed the gates, microphones flashing, cameras panning over the houses she once ruled with surgical precision. The headlines had already begun. HOA chair removed in state investigation. Whistleblower doctor exposes power abuse. Margaret Corbin wasn't in any of those frames, but her shadow lingered in every caption. The enforcer in crimson had lost her podium, but she still haunted the neighborhood she built. At noon, a resident meeting was called, the first one without her. The board chair's seat sat empty, draped in silence. For years, she'd occupied it like a throne. Now it looked like what it always should have been. Just a chair. People took turns speaking. A retired teacher apologized for staying quiet. A young couple admitted they'd feared eviction. Even the maintenance supervisor confessed he'd seen the power logs, but never dared to question them. It was as if everyone had been waiting for permission to feel human again. I said nothing for a long while. When I finally spoke, the room went still. I didn't come here to win, I said. I came here to stop losing. My home, my wife's safety, my peace. None of us should have had to beg for the right to live without fear. Heads nodded, a few eyes filled with tears. Then Jenna stood, the former assistant treasurer, the one who'd quietly passed me those first encrypted logs. Her voice shook but held steady. I was part of it, she said. I watched her change rules to target families. I thought, if I didn't help, I'd lose my house too. No, I told her gently. You helped stop it. That was the real victory. Not the state ruling, not the cameras, not the paperwork. It was this, people finally unlearning their silence. Later that afternoon, I walked past the old office window, where the clipboard queen once stood during inspections, counting infractions like a general tallying casualties. The blinds were open now. Sunlight fell across the desk she'd used to sign fines and denials. It felt strange, holy almost, to see it empty. By evening, the last of the press left. Hannah sat on our porch, the soft hum of her oxygen monitor, now replaced by the quiet rhythm of our daughter's laughter echoing through the window. Life had found its sound again. The tyrant in heels hadn't been seen since the hearing. Rumor said she'd left the city. Others whispered she'd filed an appeal. I didn't care which was true. Every regime ends the same way. Not with a shout, but a silence that finally feels safe. At sunset, I walked to the cul-de-sac where the power had first gone out that night. The same streetlights now glowed steady, unbroken. I stood under one and watched its reflection shimmer on wet pavement. That's when Laura pulled up beside me. The state inspector rolled down her window. "It's done," she said. "The agency's closing the file." "Good," I said, glancing at the homes around us. "But healing's going to take longer." She nodded. "You did more than you know, Pierce. You didn't just fight back. You reminded people that they could." I smiled faintly. "That's all I wanted." Before she drove off, Laura looked back once more. "Funny thing about power," she said. "It burns brightest right before it shorts out." As her taillights disappeared, I looked back at the houses, imperfect, uneven, finally alive. For the first time, Willow Crest didn't look like a set of rules. It looked like a community. If you've ever fought back against HOA power, hit subscribe, share your story below, and let me know where you're tuning in from. And somewhere out there, I imagine Margaret Corbin, the officer of rules, the architect of control, staring at her reflection in an empty mirror, wondering when power stopped feeling like purpose. "If you've ever stood your ground against control," I said softly, turning toward home, "you already know what freedom feels like.